The basic structural unit of the nervous system is a nerve cell or neuron. It consists of the following parts. The cell body. The cellular body contains the nucleus and other cellular organelles. Dendrites is a typical and short, abundantly branched, slender extension of the cell body that receives stimuli. The axon is typically a long, slender extension of the cell body that sends nerve impulse. Here in green, you will see the nucleus enclosed inside of the cell body. The nerve impulse begins at the tip of the dendrite branches, pass to the dendrite, to the cell body, then through the axons, and finally terminates at branches of the axons. Neurons can be classified into three general groups, and they're classified by their function. Sensory neurons or afferents receive the stimulus. They receive the initial stimulus. For example, the sensory neurons embedded in the retina of the eye are stimulated by light. So these afferent neurons will receive this stimulus by the light to create this reaction or this expression. Motor neurons, in other hands, or efferent, the simplest way that I remember the difference is to remember the efferent begins with E, so it means, or I relate this E with exit. These efferent neurons stimulate effectors, or they stimulate or send the signals to target cells that produce some kind of response. For example, motor neurons may stimulate the muscles, so relate motor neurons with muscle. They create movement to maintain the balance or to avoid the pain. For example, sweat glands to cool the body, or cells in the stomach. They send signals to the stomach to secrete gastrin in response to the smell of food, perhaps. The third neuron is called interneurons or association neurons. These neurons are located in the spinal cord or brain, and they receive impulse from sensory neurons or send impulse to motor neurons. Interneurons are integrators. This means that they evaluate impulse for appropriate response. The transmission of a nerve impulse along a neuron from one end to the other occurs as a result of a chemical change across the membrane of the neuron. The membrane of an unstimulated neuron is then polarized. That causes a difference in electrical charge between the outside and the inside of the membrane. In particular, the inside is negative with respect to the outside. But how this membrane maintain this negative charge and this polarization? It will maintain an excess of sodium on the outside and an excess of potassium on the inside. A certain amount of sodium and potassium is always leaking across the membrane, but sodium-potassium active transport pumps in the membrane actively restore the ions to the appropriate side, and the other ions, such as large negatively charged proteins and nucleic acid, reside inside the cell. 3 sodium go outside of the cell, while 2 potassiums are coming inside of the cell. So the action potential, sodium is higher inside and potassium is lower outside. Sodium gets pumped to the outside of the cell. So in a sudden inhibition of the pump, let's say a mutation where the pump cannot produce or synthesize ATP or energy, cannot use energy, what will happen to the sodium? What will happen to the accumulation inside of the cell? What it will happen is that this sodium will accumulate inside of the cell, since you have the content of this sodium higher of the inside, and this membrane potential, this action potential will pump this sodium outside. If you have a mutation or a sudden depolarization of a plasma membrane due to the movement of potassium and sodium, you will have a higher concentration on the inside because the membrane will be unable to pump this sodium outside.